The sun shone brightly in the cloudless sky, casting a golden light over the meticulously decorated garden. Rows of white chairs were arranged in perfect symmetry, adorned with ivory satin ribbons. An arch covered in fresh flowers, in soft shades of pink and white, framed the altar. The scent of freshly picked petals blended with the woody aroma of the old trees surrounding the venue, creating a magical atmosphere. Julia took a deep breath, trying to calm the anxiety rising inside her. She wore a stunning lace dress, with a delicate veil cascading over her shoulders. Her hands were cold, and she subtly squeezed them together to mask her nervousness. She felt her heart pounding in her chest, but told herself it was just the excitement of the moment. After all, she was about to marry the man she loved. At the back of the tent set up for preparations, Claire, her best friend and maid of honor, was adjusting the final details of her bouquet. "Ready?" Claire asked, offering an encouraging smile. Julia tried to smile back, but her lips trembled slightly. "I think so. It's just a lot happening at once." Claire held her hands firmly. "You're going to be amazing. Everything is perfect. Perfect." That word echoed in Julia's mind. The wedding of her dreams was right there, exactly as she had imagined it. Daniel, her fiancé, was waiting at the altar, elegantly dressed in a flawless suit. His confident smile radiated security, as it always did. He was charming, attentive, and everyone said they were the perfect couple. The music began to play, and the murmurs of the guests quieted. Her father approached, offering his arm. Julia held on to him tightly, feeling the familiar and comforting warmth. "Ready for your new life, my girl?" She nodded, forcing herself to believe she was. As she started walking down the aisle, she felt the eyes of dozens of people on her. Some were smiling, others looked emotional. Julia tried to focus on Daniel. His blue eyes were fixed on her, shining under the sunlight. But there was something in his expression that made her hesitate. For a moment, her breath caught. Something inside her tensed, a primitive instinct of warning she couldn't explain. But then, the moment passed. Julia forced a smile and moved forward, ignoring the strange feeling threatening to disturb her perfect day. The aisle felt longer than it should. With each step, Julia felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. Daniel's gaze remained fixed on her, but that strange feeling still lingered. Her heart pounded as she reached the altar, and her father squeezed her hand one last time before handing her over to the groom. "You look beautiful," Daniel whispered, gently holding her hands. Julia smiled, but a chill ran down her spine. Maybe it was just nerves. The officiant began the ceremony, his voice echoing softly through the garden. Julia tried to focus on his words, but her mind felt adrift, as if an unseen presence was lurking nearby. Then, it happened. A whisper, cold and unexpected, brushed against her ear. "He is not who you think he is." The air left her lungs instantly. Her eyes widened and she looked around, confused. The whisper had been so close, so real, that she expected to see someone beside her. But everyone was in their places, attentively watching the ceremony. Her heart pounded against her ribs. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked softly, furrowing his brows. Julia swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Yes, just a little nervous." He squeezed her hands lightly, trying to reassure her. But now, everything felt wrong. Daniel's touch was cold. The atmosphere around her felt heavier, and her mind kept replaying the whispered words over and over again. "He is not who you think he is." Who had said that, and why? Julia tried to push the uneasy feeling aside and maintain her composure. But as the ceremony continued, a weight settled in her chest, an irrational fear growing stronger with each passing second. And then, when the officiant asked her to say her vows, her voice failed. An awkward silence filled the air. All eyes were on her. Julia? Daniel called her name, his expression now tinged with concern. She opened her mouth to speak, but her throat was dry. The wind blew gently, and for a second, she could have sworn she heard the whispers echo once more. It was enough to make her hesitate. She had to decide. Now. The silence was suffocating. Everyone was waiting for Julia to say something, but she simply couldn't. The whisper still echoed in her mind, as if the words had seeped into her soul. He is not who you think he is. What did that mean? Daniel kept holding her hands, his gaze full of concern. The officiant cleared his throat, trying to ease the tension in the air. Julia, would you like to proceed with your vows? He asked, his voice calm, but full of expectation. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Fear tightened her chest like an invisible fist. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for something, anything, that could explain the feeling. And then, she saw him. At the back of the garden among the guests, a man. He was standing still, dressed in a dark suit, but he didn't belong with the others. There was something off about him. His gaze was intense, as if he were trying to say something with his eyes alone. Julia felt a deep chill run through her. She blinked, and in an instant, he was gone. Had it been her imagination? Or was there really someone there? She took a deep breath and tried to organize her thoughts. Was she being paranoid? Or was this a real warning? Daniel squeezed her hands gently. Sweetheart, is everything okay? If you need a moment, we can... Who is that man? She interrupted without thinking. Daniel's face twisted in confusion. What man? She looked back to where the stranger had been. Nothing. I thought I saw someone. Her voice faltered. Honey, you're pale. Maybe we should stop for a moment. Julia's eyes fixed on his. Daniel genuinely seemed concerned, but the whisper came back, repeating in her mind. He is not who you think he is. The ceremony seemed to unravel around her. The decorations, the soft sound of the music, the attentive gazes of the guests. Everything was there. But Julia felt displaced, as if she were living a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. Should she continue? Ignore the irrational fear and go through with the wedding? Or should she run away? The air was thick, and every second seemed to drag on as Julia struggled to decide what to do. Daniel's concerned gaze pierced through her soul, but something inside her was questioning if he was truly who she thought he was. The mysterious man she had seen, or thought she had seen, kept echoing in her mind, feeding the doubt. The officiant, already visibly uncomfortable, tried to continue with the ceremony. Julia, is everything all right? Would you like to continue? He asked in a soft voice, attempting to ease the tense moment. Julia looked at Daniel once more, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see the worry in him, but something told her she couldn't trust him entirely. The words of the whisper echoed like a warning. It was then that, without knowing what to do, she felt something strange, a sense of disconnection, as if she were observing herself from the outside. She was no longer the same woman who had been at the altar just moments ago. What was happening to her? I need to talk to you, Daniel, she said, her voice faltering. Daniel looked at her with more attention, his brow furrowed with concern. He hadn't expected this request. What's going on, Julia? You're scaring me. She looked at him, but her mind was divided between the desire to believe him and the growing doubt about who he really was. Then, not knowing what else to do, she asked, Daniel, who are you really? The words came out like a whisper, but they cut through the silence like a sharp knife. Daniel didn't respond immediately. His expression twisted, and she could see a growing tension on his face. Suddenly, he looked around at the guests. For a moment, it seemed as though he was waiting for something. Julia's heart raced, and a wave of terror took over her. Then, he stepped closer to her, took her hands and spoke in a low voice, but with a seriousness she had never imagined hearing from him. "I'm not who you think, Julia. I'm someone you should have recognized a long time ago." Julia felt a shiver run down her spine. She couldn't process what he had just said. The world around her seemed to fall apart into pieces. He wasn't the man she thought. The silence was broken by a familiar voice, a voice she hadn't heard in years. "Haven't you realized it yet, dear?" Julia froze. She recognized the voice, but she couldn't believe it. The mysterious figure appeared again, now more distinct. It was the man she had seen at the back of the garden, but he wasn't a stranger. He was someone she knew very well. "It can't be," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. The man took a step forward, and his smile was loaded with something Julia hadn't known how to identify until this moment. "I'm the key to all of this, and you'll need me, Julia. More than ever." Julia could barely process the words she had just heard. The man standing before her, someone she thought she hadn't seen since her childhood, was now here, in the middle of her wedding, with a revelation that seemed impossible. The world around her began to fall apart into fragments. She looked at Daniel, trying to find any sign, any explanation. He was pale, his expression one of utter bewilderment, but at the same time, there was something in him that seemed to be pulling away, as if he were just a mask. The man in front of her smiled slightly, a mysterious smile, as though he were pleased with the confusion he had caused. His eyes, which once seemed so familiar, were now deep and cold, as if he were far removed from all of this. "Julia, do you really think things are simple?" he asked, as though he were reading her thoughts. "Haven't you realized yet? Everything you thought you knew is about to be revealed." The officiant seemed stunned, and the guests were shifting in their seats, beginning to sense that something very strange was happening. But no one dared to interrupt. What could be said? Julia felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Her mind was in turmoil, trying to piece together what was happening. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man stepped closer slowly, and Julia tried to move back, but his words seemed to bind her in place. He was too close now, and the aura he radiated was impossible to ignore. The feeling that something much larger was at play was tangible, and she didn't know who to trust anymore. "I'm someone who should have left your life a long time ago," he said, his eyes fixed on her with intensity. "But now, Julia, you have no choice. I'm here, and the truth will finally be revealed." Daniel stepped forward, trying to intervene. "Enough," he said, his voice hoarse. "What is happening here? Who is this man? Julia, what is he saying?" But she couldn't focus on him anymore. The man in front of her seemed to carry such a weight that even the sound of Daniel's words felt distant. "You should know, Julia. There's something you've never known. Your marriage. Everything you believe is about to be changed. The answer is inside you. It's in the memory you've always had, but never recognized." Julia's gaze blurred. She knew he was talking about something deep, something she had ignored for years. Something about the past that now seemed to be coming to light in a way she never imagined. "I don't understand," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the man as his words grew heavier. "What do you mean by that? What's happening?" The man smiled, and it seemed more like a promise. "The question, Julia, is not what is happening, but what has always happened and you never wanted to see." Time seemed to stop. The whispers she had heard earlier were now taking on a clear meaning. The man before her, the unexpected revelation, and the feeling that everything was about to change engulfed her with an irresistible power. and at that moment, Julia knew her life would never be the same. The silence that followed the man's last comment was deafening. Julia was paralyzed, feeling the weight of the words he had just spoken. What he was suggesting seemed impossible, but at the same time, she felt something inside her that told her it might be true. She looked at Daniel, who was visibly agitated, trying to approach, but something was holding him back. He seemed so distant, as if an invisible barrier had been erected between them. His eyes, which she had always considered full of love and trust, now seemed empty of any explanation, any certainty. Fear was clear on his face, and confusion mixed with pain. "Julia," Daniel whispered, his voice trembling, as if he were asking for help, but also wanting to understand what was happening. "This doesn't make sense. Don't listen to him. I am the man you're going to marry, not him. You love me." The man who was still standing before her, however, seemed to exist on another plane. He wasn't shaken. In fact, he seemed calmer, more determined. Julia felt a coldness she couldn't describe coming from him, as if he knew what would happen next. "Do you think all of this is real?" he asked, his voice smooth and penetrating. "What you call reality here is nothing but a construct. I am what you've always ignored, the truth, and it's inside you, in your past, Julia, in what you've never wanted to remember." Julia's heart was pounding, her thoughts a whirlwind. She wanted to trust Daniel. She wanted to believe that all of this was just a lie. But there was something inside her, an unsettling feeling, that was pushing her toward this path. The man's presence, his insistence, the intensity of his words, were beginning to make sense in a way she couldn't fully comprehend. "I don't know what you're trying to tell me, but," Julia began, trying to cling to any shred of logic. "I'm about to get married. Daniel and I were about to—" Her voice faltered, and she looked at her fiancé, seeking some kind of answer. But Daniel was lost, his expression now mixed with desperation and anger. "Julia, don't do this," he exclaimed, his face flushed with frustration. "Don't listen to him. He doesn't know anything. This is all a lie." Julia felt Daniel's words like a punch in the stomach, but the man before her remained unshaken. He was unperturbed. "What will you do, Julia?" he said softly, almost as if he were guiding a child. "Stay with what's easy and comfortable, or face the truth, no matter how painful it might be." The man's gaze was penetrating, and she felt like he was inside her, touching a part of her being she didn't know existed. Something in her mind, a distant memory, began to ignite, like a faint candle in the dark. She remembered her childhood, a time when things were different, but the memory was fragmented, incomplete. And what she felt now, stronger than ever, was that this was the key. "What do you mean by that?" Julia asked, trying to gather strength. He smiled enigmatically, as if he were satisfied with the progress he was making. She didn't know how, but he knew exactly how to provoke what she needed to see. Something deep, something lost, something she wasn't ready to understand. "What you don't know, Julia, is that he pointed at Daniel, is not who you think. What you believe to be your life, it's not real. You have to choose now. Continue in the lie or accept the truth. The choice is yours, but remember, the consequences go beyond what you can imagine." Daniel, now pale and desperate, tried to approach again, but Julia was fixed on the man before her. She couldn't take her eyes off him. She could no longer look away. Something inside her already knew that this revelation would change everything. And for the first time, she felt that the truth might be more liberating than anything she had ever lived. With one last deep breath, Julia made her choice. "I need to know the truth," she said, her voice now full of a determination she didn't know she had. The man nodded, a satisfied smile on his face, as if he had been waiting for this answer. He extended his hand, inviting her to follow his path. "Then come. What you're about to discover will change everything," he said, and with one last glance at Daniel, Julia took the first step toward the unknown. She knew her life would never be the same, but somehow she was ready. The journey that awaited her from that moment on was uncertain, but the search for truth propelled her forward, without hesitation.